He's not crying, he's choking. The words snapped through the polished silence of the private terminal like a lightning strike, but no one moved at first. At Whitmore Executive Airfield, where million-dollar watches gleamed beneath soft, golden lights and polished marble reflected the hurried footsteps of the elite, panic spread fast but understanding came slow. Little Oliver Whitmore, barely 18 months old and wrapped in a cashmere blanket that probably cost more than most people's rent, was screaming so hard his tiny face had turned bright red. His nanny bounced him nervously near the boarding gate, whispering soft comforts, her hands trembling as the boy's cries grew sharper, thinner, stranger. Around them, assistants froze with coffee cups in hand, pilots exchanged uneasy glances, and 2 security guards stepped closer, unsure whether to help or stay out of the way. Ethan Whitmore, billionaire founder of Whitmore Dynamics, had just stepped out of a phone call worth $40 million when he heard his son's cries echo across the terminal. He stopped cold, his polished dress shoes locking against the marble floor. Oliver never cried like that. Not like this. The sound wasn't normal. It wasn't frustration. It wasn't fear. It was desperation. Ethan's chest tightened as he crossed the room fast, loosening his tie. "What happened?" he barked, his voice cutting through the noise. The nanny looked pale. I don't know. He was eating crackers and then he just... Oliver let out another piercing cry, but this one broke halfway through, ending in a terrible silence before another strained gasp. Ethan reached for his son, panic starting to crawl into his throat, but everyone around him began speaking at once. "Maybe he's overtired. Get him water. Call the pediatrician. Pat his back." The terminal turned into noise. Expensive noise. Loud, frantic, useless noise. And standing 20 feet away near the glass entrance, soaked from the rain outside, was 8-year-old Noah Carter. His sneakers were worn thin at the soles, his oversized hoodie hung loose around his narrow shoulders, and a faded blue backpack rested against his back like it held his whole life. Inside. He had only stepped into the terminal to get warm for a minute. Security hadn't noticed him yet. But Noah noticed the baby. He stared hard at Oliver, his brown eyes narrowing. The sound. The way the little boy's hands clenched. The way his tiny chest jerked. Noah's stomach dropped. He knew that sound. He had heard it before. 2 years ago. His baby brother. Same panic. Same look. Same silence between cries. Noah took one step forward, his heart pounding so hard it felt louder than the storm outside. Nobody saw him. Nobody listened. The rich adults kept circling, frozen in fear, trapped in confusion. But Noah knew. And when Oliver's cry suddenly stopped altogether, and the baby's small body stiffened in the nanny's arms, Noah's voice broke through the room like shattered glass. "Turn him over! He can't breathe!" The room froze. For one sharp second, every sound inside the private terminal seemed to disappear except for the storm tapping against the glass walls and the faint, strained gasp coming from Oliver's tiny body. Ethan Whitmore turned toward the voice, his eyes landing on the boy standing near the entrance. Small. Soaked. Shivering. Completely out of place among the polished leather briefcases and tailored coats. Security reacted first. "Hey, kid, back up," one guard snapped, stepping toward Noah with an outstretched arm. "This is not your business." Noah did not move. His eyes stayed locked on Oliver. The baby's face was changing now, losing its color, his little fingers curling tightly into the nanny's blouse. Noah felt his chest tighten with memory. He could still hear his baby brother Isaiah making that same sound in their tiny apartment kitchen 2 winters ago, the sound that had turned his grandmother's face white with fear. Noah remembered what the paramedic had done. He remembered every second. "Turn him over!" Noah shouted again, louder this time. "He has something stuck." The nanny looked at Ethan, panic flooding her eyes. "Sir, I do not know what to do." Ethan's pulse pounded in his ears. He had negotiated billion-dollar deals, stood before investors, solved impossible problems with numbers and strategy. But none of that mattered now. His son was in his arms, and he was helpless. Oliver's cries were gone now. The silence was worse. Much worse. Ethan looked down at his son's wide eyes, the tiny mouth opening but no sound coming out. Fear hit him like ice water. "Call 911!" someone yelled. Phones came out. Hands shook. But Noah's voice cut through it all again. "There is no time!" Security grabbed Noah by the shoulder, trying to pull him back. "Enough," the guard said sharply. But Noah twisted free, desperation making his small body stronger. "Please!" Noah cried, his voice cracking. "You have to listen!" Ethan stared at him. There was something in the boy's eyes that stopped him. Not panic. Not fear. Recognition. Noah knew this. Somehow he knew. Ethan's breath caught. "Wait," Ethan said, raising a hand to stop security. The room paused. Noah stepped forward slowly, his wet sneakers squeaking against the marble floor. Up close, Ethan could see the boy was younger than he thought. 8, maybe? Thin. Tired. But steady. Noah looked at Oliver, then at Ethan. "Lay him across your arm," Noah said, his voice low but firm. "Face down." Ethan hesitated. Every instinct in him screamed not to trust a stranger, especially a child. But Oliver's tiny body jerked again, weaker this time. Noah swallowed hard. "Please, sir," he whispered. "My little brother almost died like this. I remember what they did." Ethan looked down at his son, then back at Noah. For the first time in years, Ethan Whitmore made a decision without logic, without proof, without control. He trusted the boy. Ethan lowered Oliver carefully across his forearm, just like Noah had said, the baby's tiny body trembling with weak, shallow movements. The entire terminal watched in complete silence now, as if the polished walls themselves were holding their breath. Noah stepped closer, rainwater still dripping from the edges of his sleeves onto the marble floor. Up close, his small hands trembled, not from fear, but from memory. He could still see Isaiah in his mind, sitting in that cracked plastic high chair, coughing, his grandmother crying, the paramedic moving fast and calm like time itself had slowed down. Noah swallowed hard and pointed. "Support his head," he said quietly. Ethan adjusted his arm instantly, his hands shaking harder now than during any boardroom crisis he had ever faced. Oliver's little face had gone pale, his lips parted but silent. Noah leaned in, his eyes focused on the baby's back. "Pat here," Noah said, touching his own shoulder blade to show him. "Firm. Not too hard." Ethan obeyed. Once. Twice. 3 times. Nothing. The nanny covered her mouth, tears spilling down her face. An assistant whispered into the phone with emergency dispatch, voice breaking. Noah's heart raced. He knew there was still time. There had to be. "Again," Noah said. Ethan struck gently but firmly between Oliver's shoulders. The sound echoed in the stillness. Then Oliver's tiny body jerked. A small piece of cracker dropped onto Ethan's polished shoe, wet from saliva. For one impossible second, nobody moved. Then Oliver inhaled. A sharp, loud breath. Then another. And then the cry came back. Loud. Strong. Angry. Alive. The sound exploded through the terminal like music. The nanny collapsed into tears. One of the assistants gasped so hard she nearly dropped her phone. The security guards stepped back, stunned into silence. Ethan froze completely, staring at his son as Oliver cried into his chest, breathing again, gripping Ethan's shirt with tiny fists. The color rushed back into the baby's cheeks. Ethan's heartbeat thundered so hard he could feel it in his fingertips. He looked at Noah like he was seeing something impossible. A boy no older than 8, standing there in soaked clothes and broken sneakers, breathing hard, his small chest rising and falling as if he had just carried the weight of the room. The paramedics burst through the doors seconds later, rolling equipment across the floor, but the crisis had already passed. One of them quickly checked Oliver, listening to his breathing, checking his pulse. Then he nodded. "He is okay," the paramedic said. Airway is clear. Ethan shut his eyes for a moment, relief washing through him so hard his knees nearly gave out. When he opened them again, he looked straight at Noah. Really looked at him. Not the torn hoodie. Not the wet hair. Not the old backpack. The boy. The courage. The calm. Ethan stood slowly, Oliver still in his arms, and stepped toward Noah. His voice came out rough, almost unrecognizable. How did you know? Noah looked down at the marble floor, his sneakers leaving little rainwater marks beneath him. His voice was quiet when he answered. Because nobody listened the first time it happened to my brother. The question hung in the air like the last note of a song nobody wanted to interrupt. Noah kept his eyes on the floor, watching drops of rain slide off the edge of his hoodie and gather beside his worn sneakers. Around him, the private terminal slowly came back to life. Phones lowered. Shoulders relaxed. Breaths returned. But something had changed. The room was not looking at Ethan Whitmore anymore. They were looking at Noah. Ethan adjusted Oliver against his chest, the little boy still crying softly now, healthy cries, strong cries, the kind Ethan had never been more grateful to hear. He stared at Noah, trying to understand how a child who looked like he had nowhere to go had just done what none of them could. Your brother? Ethan asked, his voice quieter now, stripped of its sharp edge. Noah nodded, still not lifting his eyes. He was too, Noah said. He swallowed part of a toy car. My grandma called for help, but it took a long time for the ambulance to get there. His fingers tightened around the strap of his faded blue backpack. The paramedics showed me what to do. I remembered. Ethan felt something shift inside him. A strange weight. Respect. And guilt. Because in those 30 seconds of chaos, while everyone with money and power had panicked, the smallest person in the room had stayed clear. One of the paramedics stepped over and gave Ethan a reassuring smile. Your son is stable, sir. He is breathing normally. I would still recommend getting him checked at the hospital, just to be safe. Ethan nodded but barely heard him. His eyes stayed on Noah. Security moved closer again, awkward now, unsure what to do with the boy they had nearly thrown out. One guard cleared his throat. Sir, should we escort him out? Ethan's head snapped up. Escort him out? His voice came back cold. Sharp enough to stop the whole room again. He looked at the guard like the question itself offended him. This boy just saved my son. The guard stepped back immediately. Noah shifted uncomfortably. He was not used to adults defending him. Especially rich ones. Ethan took a slow breath, then crouched slightly so he was closer to Noah's height, Oliver still resting against his shoulder. Up close, Ethan noticed details he had missed before. The frayed seams on Noah's sleeves. The water stains on his backpack. The dark circles under his eyes. This was not just rain. This was exhaustion. What is your name? Ethan asked. Noah hesitated, then answered. Noah Carter. Ethan nodded slowly, as if memorizing it. Noah, he repeated. Oliver stirred, his tiny hand reaching out weakly, brushing against Ethan's jacket before settling. Ethan glanced down at his son, then back at Noah. Where are your parents? The question landed differently than Ethan expected. Noah's shoulders stiffened. His fingers gripped the backpack strap tighter. For the first time since speaking, Noah looked away. Through the giant glass windows, the storm outside had gotten worse, rain falling harder against the runway lights. Noah swallowed. I do not have anybody waiting for me, he said softly. Ethan felt his stomach drop. And in that moment, holding his son while standing in the warmth of a private terminal, Ethan Whitmore suddenly realized the boy who had saved Oliver might have nowhere warm to sleep tonight. Noah shifted his weight, his wet socks cold inside shoes that had long ago stopped keeping water out. The warmth of the terminal felt strange now, almost borrowed, like he had stepped into a world that was never meant for him. Ethan stayed crouched, studying the boy's face, trying to understand the quiet heaviness behind those words. Nobody? Ethan asked carefully. Noah shook his head once. My grandma passed last spring, he said. His voice was flat, practiced, like grief had been repeated enough times to lose its sharp edges. My mom died before that. My dad. I never knew him. The words settled heavily between them. Ethan glanced around the terminal, at the expensive luggage, the polished walls, the people who had witnessed everything. It all felt different now. Smaller somehow. Oliver had stopped crying and was resting against Ethan's shoulder, breathing soft and steady, his tiny fingers curled around Ethan's collar. Ethan looked at his son, then back at Noah. Where are you staying? Noah hesitated. His eyes moved toward the glass doors where rain streaked down like silver lines in the runway lights. Around, Noah answered. Ethan frowned. Around where? Noah looked embarrassed. Bus stations. Shelters when they let me in. Sometimes under the overpass near Grant Street. Ethan felt the answer hit harder than he expected. 8 years old. Alone. Sleeping wherever the city allowed him to disappear. The thought twisted something deep inside him. The nanny stepped closer, still pale but calmer now. Sir, the car is ready for the hospital. Ethan nodded absently, but his eyes stayed on Noah. Noah took a small step back, adjusting his backpack. Your boy is okay now, Noah said softly. That is all that matters. Ethan noticed it then. Noah was preparing to leave. To walk back out into the storm like saving a life had changed nothing about his own. Ethan stood up slowly. Wait. Noah paused. Ethan reached into his coat pocket and pulled out his wallet. Noah's eyes dropped to it, and Ethan could see the reaction instantly. Not hope. Not excitement. Discomfort. Ethan pulled out a few bills and held them forward. For helping my son, Ethan said. Noah stared at the money for a second, then shook his head. No, sir. Ethan blinked. Take it. Noah stepped back again. I did not help him for money. His voice stayed steady, but there was pride in it. Quiet pride. The kind Ethan had not expected. Around them, people exchanged looks. A billionaire offering money was normal. A homeless child refusing it was not. Noah looked down, rubbing his sleeve with his thumb. My grandma used to say if you save somebody, you do it because it is right. Not because they can pay. Ethan slowly lowered the money. For the second time in less than 10 minutes, Noah Carter had left him speechless. Oliver stirred against Ethan's shoulder and opened sleepy eyes, looking past his father, straight at Noah. Then the baby reached out one tiny hand toward him. Noah smiled for the first time. Small. Almost surprised. Ethan saw it. Saw the way Oliver leaned toward the boy who had saved him. Saw the strange connection neither of them understood yet. Outside, thunder rolled over the runway. Noah glanced toward the storm, then toward the doors. He tightened his backpack strap and took another step away. Ethan watched him go, but something inside him refused to let that be the end. Noah turned toward the glass doors, the storm outside blurring the runway lights into streaks of white and gold. He pulled his hood tighter over his head and adjusted the faded blue backpack against his shoulders, preparing to step back into the cold night like he had done 100 times before. But before he could reach the exit, 2 airport police officers stepped inside, rain dripping from their jackets, their radios crackling softly. One of the security guards immediately pointed toward Noah. That is him, the guard said. Noah froze. His small body stiffened. Ethan noticed it instantly. The way Noah's shoulders tensed, the way his eyes lowered like this was familiar. Too familiar. One officer approached, calm but serious. Son, we got a report about a child wandering alone near restricted property. We need to ask you a few questions. Noah gripped his backpack strap tighter. His voice came out barely above a whisper. I was leaving. Where are your parents? The officer asked. Noah looked down. Ethan knew that silence now. The officer exchanged a look with his partner. Do you have somewhere safe tonight? Noah shook his head once. The answer was enough. We may need to contact child services, the officer said gently. Noah's breathing changed. Not panic. Something heavier. Defeat. Like he had heard those words before and knew what came after. Ethan felt Oliver's shift in his arms and looked at Noah standing there under the bright airport lights, small and alone, the boy who had just stepped into danger without hesitation to save his son now looking like he had nowhere to run from his own life. Ethan stepped forward. Wait. The officers turned. This boy is with me, Ethan said. The words surprised even him. Noah looked up fast, startled. One officer recognized him immediately. Mr. Whitmore, with respect, protocol requires… Protocol? Ethan interrupted, his voice low but firm. Protocol would have let my son stop breathing while everyone stood there guessing. The officer hesitated. Ethan softened his tone. He saved my child. He is not a threat. Oliver, now calmer, looked at Noah again and made a soft little sound, almost like recognition. Noah's face softened for a moment. The second officer crouched slightly toward Noah. Son, we are not here to scare you. We just need to know if somebody is looking for you. Noah swallowed hard. Nobody is. The honesty of it hit the room like cold air. Ethan looked at the boy and something in his chest tightened again. How long had Noah been carrying that truth alone? Ethan turned to the officers. I will take responsibility for him tonight. The words came out before he had fully thought them through, but once spoken, they felt right. The officers exchanged another look. Sir, that is highly unusual. Ethan gave a dry smile. So is an 8-year-old saving a billionaire's son in an airport terminal. The paramedic, still packing up nearby, stepped forward. For what it is worth, the boy kept a clear head when everyone else lost theirs. That helped. The officers relaxed slightly. Noah stood motionless, confused by what was happening. Nobody had ever stepped in for him before. Ethan looked at Noah. Come with us to the hospital, he said. Oliver still needs to be checked. After that, we will figure out where you are going. Noah stared at him, unsure whether to trust this strange turn of fate. Outside, thunder rolled again, but for the first time that night, the storm did not feel like it was waiting for him alone. The rain had softened to a steady whisper by the time Ethan's black SUV pulled away from the private terminal, its headlights cutting through the wet streets like twin beams through fog. Noah sat in the third row, stiff and silent, his faded blue backpack clutched tightly against his chest like it was the only thing in the world that belonged to him. Across from him, Oliver sat strapped into a child's seat, wrapped in a warm blanket the nanny had placed around him before staying behind to handle the cancelled flight. The baby looked exhausted now, his tiny eyes heavy, but every few seconds he looked toward Noah, as if searching for the face that had pulled him back from danger. Ethan sat beside Oliver, staring out the rain-streaked window, but his mind stayed on the boy in the back. It had been 20 minutes, and Noah had not said a word. The silence inside the vehicle felt different from the chaos at the terminal. Softer. Heavier. Ethan glanced into the rearview mirror. Noah looked so small in the oversized seat, feet not even touching the floor. 8 years old. Alone in a city of 8 million people. Ethan could not make sense of it. You hungry? Ethan asked finally, his voice breaking the silence. Noah looked up, surprised by the question. He hesitated, then nodded once. Ethan reached into the small compartment beside him and handed back a wrapped turkey sandwich from the airport lounge. Noah stared at it for a second like he was unsure if it was really meant for him. Go ahead, Ethan said. Noah unwrapped it carefully, like something fragile, and took a bite. Ethan noticed how fast the boy swallowed, how his hands shook slightly from hunger. Oliver watched him with sleepy curiosity, then made a tiny sound from his seat. Noah looked over and smiled. He is okay now, Noah said softly, almost to himself. Ethan nodded. Because of you. Noah lowered his eyes again. Anybody would have helped. Ethan looked at him through the mirror. No, he said quietly. They would not. The words settled in the car. Outside, the city lights blurred into gold and red across the wet pavement. After a minute, Ethan spoke again. Your mother, he said carefully. What was her name? Noah froze mid-bite. He swallowed and looked out the window. Lena Carter. Ethan's breath caught. Just slightly. A strange flicker of recognition moved through him, fast and sharp like a forgotten photograph. Lena Carter. He knew that name. Or thought he did. He turned fully now. Lena Carter? Noah nodded. She worked nights at St. Mary's Hospital. Ethan felt his stomach tighten. St. Mary's. 10 years ago. A hospital room. Bright white lights. His wife Claire, pale and exhausted after Oliver's birth complications. And a nurse. A calm voice. Gentle hands. A woman who stayed hours past her shift because Ethan had been trapped in London on business, and Claire was alone. Ethan sat up straighter. The memory hit harder now. The name. Lena. He remembered Claire talking about her. Saying that nurse had stayed when nobody else did. Ethan turned toward Noah, his voice quieter than before. Did your mother ever work in neonatal care? Noah looked confused. Yes, he said. Ethan stared at him, the rain tapping against the windows like fingertips. And for the first time that night, Ethan Whitmore began to understand that Noah saving Oliver might not have been chance at all. By the time they reached St. Mary's Hospital, the storm had faded into a cold mist, clinging to the city streets like breath against glass. The emergency entrance glowed under bright white lights as nurses hurried in and out, their shoes tapping against wet pavement. Ethan stepped out first, holding Oliver close against his chest, the baby now half asleep, his breathing soft and steady. Noah followed behind, slower, clutching his backpack and the last piece of the sandwich Ethan had given him, as if saving it for later. Inside, the warmth hit him immediately, carrying the familiar smell of soap, coffee, and clean linen. Noah stopped for a second, looking around. Hospitals always made him think of his mother. Ethan noticed. You have been here before? He asked quietly as they walked toward the pediatric floor. Noah nodded. A lot. His voice was distant. My mom worked double shifts here. Sometimes Grandma brought me to wait for her. Ethan felt the pieces clicking together harder now. At the check-in desk, Oliver was taken for a quick examination, and Ethan was told it would only take a few minutes. For the first time all night, Ethan and Noah were left alone in the waiting room, surrounded by soft humming lights and rows of empty blue chairs. Rainwater still dripped from Noah's sleeves onto the tile floor. Ethan sat across from him, elbows on his knees, studying the boy. What happened to your mother? He asked carefully. Noah looked down at his hands. He traced the edge of his sandwich wrapper with his thumb. She got sick, he said. Real tired all the time. His voice stayed calm, but Ethan could hear the weight beneath it. She kept working anyway. Said bills did not stop just because people got sick. Ethan swallowed. He remembered Claire saying Lena Carter never sat down, always moving, always helping everybody else. Did the hospital help? Ethan asked. Noah gave a small shrug. Not enough. The answer hit Ethan harder than it should have. Not enough. He leaned back, memories stirring now, clearer than before. Claire in that hospital bed, pale and scared. Lena sitting beside her after midnight, holding Oliver when Claire was too weak, telling her stories to keep her calm until Ethan could fly back from Europe. Claire had told Ethan once, "That nurse stayed with me when nobody else could." He had sent flowers. A thank you card. Then moved on with life. Ethan looked at Noah and felt something sharp in his chest. While his family healed and returned to luxury, Lena Carter had gone back to double shifts, back to struggle, back to a life that had somehow ended with her sons sleeping under bus stations. Noah looked up suddenly. Did you know her? Ethan hesitated. Then nodded. I think your mother helped save my wife and son once. Noah blinked. Oliver? Ethan shook his head softly. Not Oliver. My oldest son. Daniel. Noah frowned. Where is he? Ethan looked down. His voice lowered. He died 3 years ago. Heart condition. The waiting room grew still. Noah's face softened. I am sorry. Ethan looked at him, surprised by the sincerity. Most adults got awkward around grief. Noah did not. Maybe because grief had become part of his own life too. Then Ethan remembered something Claire had once said about Lena. Something strange. Something unfinished. Claire had told him Lena was searching for someone. Looking for somebody she had lost. Ethan leaned forward, heart suddenly beating faster. Noah, Ethan said carefully, did your mother ever talk about your father? Noah sat very still in the blue hospital chair, his small fingers tightening around the straps of his faded backpack as Ethan's questions settled between them. The waiting room hummed softly with distant footsteps and quiet monitor beeps from behind closed doors. Noah looked down at the floor for a long time before answering. Not much, he said. She used to say he was a good man who got lost. Ethan frowned slightly. Lost? Noah nodded. That is what she called it. She said some people disappear without meaning to. Like they missed the road home. Ethan leaned back, letting those words sink in. It sounded like something Claire had once told him about Lena, years ago. That she was holding on to hope for someone who had vanished from her life before Noah was born. Ethan looked at the boy, seeing him differently now. Not just as the child who had saved Oliver, but as the son of a woman who had once stood beside his own family when they needed it most. A nurse stepped into the waiting room, smiling. Oliver is doing great. His lungs are clear, and everything looks normal. You can take him home. Relief washed through Ethan again, warm and heavy. He thanked her and stood, but before walking toward Oliver's room, he stopped and turned back to Noah. Come with me. Noah hesitated. Why? Ethan looked at him honestly. Because I do not think you should be alone tonight. Noah stared at him, uncertain. Adults made promises all the time. Most of them disappeared by morning. Ethan saw the doubt. Just tonight, Ethan said gently. A warm bed. Food. Dry clothes. That is all. Noah looked down at his wet sneakers. He was tired. More tired than he wanted to admit. And for the first time in a long time, someone was offering something without asking for anything back. Slowly, he nodded. 20 minutes later, Ethan carried Oliver through the front doors of the Whitmore estate, Noah walking quietly beside him, his backpack hanging low against his shoulders. The house was enormous, glowing warmly against the dark sky, its white columns lit by golden porch lights. Noah stopped at the entrance, staring up at it like it belonged in another world. Ethan noticed. It is just a house, he said. Noah shook his head. Not where I come from. Inside, the warmth wrapped around them immediately. A housekeeper hurried over, eyes wide at the sight of the soaking boy beside Ethan. But Ethan only said one thing. Prepare the guest room. Noah stood frozen on the polished wooden floor, looking down at his wet shoes, afraid to step too far inside. Then Oliver, half asleep in Ethan's arms, reached out again. Tiny fingers stretching toward Noah. Noah stepped closer without thinking, and Oliver wrapped his little hand around Noah's finger like he had known him forever. Ethan watched it happen. That small hand? That quiet trust. Two children from worlds so far apart, connected by one impossible night. Ethan looked at the faded blue backpack hanging from Noah's shoulder, then at the nursery upstairs waiting for Oliver, filled with warmth, blankets, and safety. And in that moment, standing between those two worlds, Ethan Whitmore understood something he had not seen before. Tonight, Noah had not only saved his son. He had walked into a house carrying the last unfinished kindness his mother had once given Ethan's family. And this time, Ethan was not going to let that kindness disappear into the rain.